This video is made possible by Practical Defense Systems, the best online security training at the lowest prices. You can start your security career today online at pdsclasses.com. Check them out. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV. I am extremely grateful for everything you do, so please don't stop. Today I've got a great interview with Chuck Michel, the volunteer president from the California Rifle and Pistol Association, constitutional attorney, and the founder and pretty much the head honcho over at Michel and Associates, a constitutional law firm that fights for your rights. He's going to give us his impression of the SCOTUS case that was just argued the other day over concealed carry in the state and city of New York. I think we're going to get a big win there. I suspect Chuck does too. Before I go to Chuck, I do want to let you know that he has a serious problem right now with his webcam. It's blurry. We did everything we could possibly do to get it to focus properly. It didn't, but Chuck is a constitutional warrior. And he's like, okay, well, let's do it anyway. So we did. So please excuse the fuzzy webcam. Great information. Stick with me. Here we go. We're going to go talk to Chuck. Chuck, thank you very much for joining me on the program. I really appreciate it. Just so you know, I did listen to the entire oral argument. I found it fascinating, but not being an attorney, I've just got a layman's view of it. Can you give me what your impression is on where you think the judges are going, or what hits you from their questioning? Any of that kind of stuff would be very helpful for everyone, I think.
Well, I think we're going to win either 5-4 or 6-3 even. Roberts, to my pleasant surprise, was actually coming across as very pro-Second Amendment in his questioning. He was kind of the weak link before, so we may actually pick him up and get 6 votes. It is kind of interesting that, the liberal justices had their positions, and if it wasn't for the fact that we had these new justices on that court, we could have just as easily lost. It's amazing how smart people can twist things around to fit their worldview. And so, but in this case, I think the questioning from the justices clearly indicated that they understand that the right to bear arms extends outside the home, and that you can't have some kind of a discretionary permitting system where some bureaucrat can decide that you can or cannot exercise that right. So I'm very, very hopeful. The question will be, how far will they go? The liberal justices and the attorney for New York State and for the Biden administration, who basically jumped in the middle of this, tried to wrap the court around the axle, basically intellectually, by pointing out, where are you going to draw the line? Do you have to allow guns in Giant Stadium? Do you have to allow guns in Times Square on New Year's Eve? All these things that really aren't the point of this case and should not really be the kind of thing that would cause you to rule against this. But ultimately, the conservative justices came in and said, look, as this got closer and closer to becoming an issue of how densely populated an area was, like Manhattan versus upstate New York, they said, the exercise of a right does not depend on whether or not you live in a densely populated area. So it was a very interesting argument. I've said before, the big question is going to be what standard of review will the court adopt, because whatever they adopt in this case will be the applicable standard in all Second Amendment challenges. And if they go text, history, and tradition rather than some kind of levels of tiered scrutiny, which is what they've been doing, rational basis, intermediate scrutiny, strict scrutiny, if they jettison that and go with text, history, and tradition, it could completely change the way Second Amendment litigation is processed, because you won't really be dealing with statistics and experts and, is this gun bad? Is this gun good? Is this a person bad or good? Is this area good or bad for gun? You'll be dealing with history and tradition and the policy decisions that were made at the time of the passing, rather than some kind of trying to determine some new kind of appropriate policy based on what the legislature is urging nowadays. So if that happens, that will be a sea change in the way Second Amendment cases are litigated, and I'm very hopeful that that is what's going to happen.
It was interesting listening to Fletcher, who I think was the attorney for the Biden administration. He seemed to try to morph the text history and tradition argument. He left the text out of it, but he wanted to talk about the history and tradition being the history and tradition after the amendment was actually put into the Bill of Rights, and talked about, well, basically his argument was, since we've been doing this in New York for 100 years, we ought to be able to keep doing it because that amounts to the history and tradition. It's as if they're co-opting the history and tradition argument for their own purposes, or am I reading that in a funny way?
No, you're right. That's how the game is going to change. The argument won't be, is this particular rifle suitable for self-defense or some sporting purpose? It will be, what were the framers thinking, or the writers of a law thinking when they wrote it? And that will be based on that. Instead of having junk science, now we're going to have junk history.
That's going to be an interesting argument going forward. So this doesn't end here, and I think I keep repeating that for everyone. This is not the end. This is the beginning, really, isn't it?
Well, it's funny you say that. I remember when Heller first came down, and everybody says, all right, this is the end of this argument. And Dave said, this is not the beginning of the end. This is not the end. This is the end of the beginning. And that was what Heller is. And now we're still in the middle, but we still have a long way to go before the scope of the right to keep and to bear arms and what that really means is fleshed out in the courts and in the law.
But I was further encouraged by Kavanaugh's argument because he really drilled down into the scrutiny issue, didn't he?
These are the things that Justice Scalia warned about in the Heller decision, and that courts have taken and twisted over the last decade to be able to uphold gun laws that should be declared unconstitutional. That they can put their thumbs on the scale of justice, basically, twist the facts, twist the law to suit an end result that they desire, and that will be harder to do, but still not impossible when there is going to be junk history introduced under the originalism, the text history and tradition approach. And by the way, the lawyers that work for Bloomberg, and there's like 800 of them, he spends a lot of money, funding anti-Second Amendment efforts. They've started all this on the Second Amendment laws. I mean, on the Duke Firearms Law Center. It's online, and they're publishing all kinds of scholarship about the history of concealed carry laws, the history of gun laws in general. All of this because they knew this is a couple years old. They knew that this originalist approach was coming, and so they're already gearing up for it.
Do you think there's any possibility that the court might be very specific in directing that we use text history and tradition as a way of determining the constitutionality of Second Amendment cases? And if so,
that's very definitely possible. They can say that all the tests that have been put to use since Heller came down that's the wrong test. They can throw all of that out and say the appropriate test is originalism, text history, and tradition. And that would get rid of a couple of hundred bad rulings in one fell swoop. They'd all need to be relitigated. So, Second Amendment Law Center and the CRPA are building up our war chests. We plan to hit the ground running as soon as we'll see a decision from this court in June. And we would like to be loaded for bear, so to speak, and ready to file multiple lawsuits as soon as that decision comes down to challenge some of these laws that have been on the books, even if they've been unsuccessfully challenged in the past because the wrong standard of review is applied in California and across the country to dismantle some of this baloney that has been basically force-fed to gun owners in California and in other anti-gun states.
Well, and I want to drill down a little further in there, but before we do that, you mentioned the Second Amendment Law Center and CRPA, and I want to make sure that people understand that, and I've been describing it this way. It may not be the most the nicest thing to say, but NRA has become a dumpster fire. I'm a life member, and I've supported them for decades, ever since I was about 18 years old, but they've become a dumpster fire, and they're not helping with any of this anymore. And as a result, if you would like these lawsuits to go forward, you need to support organizations that are actually going to fund them. The California Rifle and Pistol Association has stepped up tremendously and has absorbed a lot of these bills. And Chuck, along with others, have started the Second Amendment Law Center, and they are absorbing a lot of these bills. So if you're going to put money someplace, put money there, please, so that we can continue this fight. I will put links in the description so you can go directly there. Chuck, one of the things that I was wondering about whether you think the justices might do that might stave off some of this junk history issue is when we talk about originalism and we talk about text history and tradition, then the question becomes what text, what history, what tradition? Can the court actually say, if you're looking at history, this is the history you're looking at? Or if you're looking at tradition, this is the tradition you're looking at? Or do you think that they'll go that far? Well,
no, I think that every law potentially has a different text and a different history and a different tradition. So they may get into that with respect to public carry laws. And it'll be interesting to see how they balance open versus concealed carry, because the states have been trying to use that to confuse issues all along. But there's other laws that have different text, history, and traditions, or that the original Second Amendment text, history, and tradition may result in a different interpretation of a different law. So it's not necessarily, I don't know that the Supreme Court can zero in. They can say that this is the history of the Second Amendment, and they did a lot of that in Heller, and that was pointed out during the oral argument. So they could clarify what the appropriate historical context is potentially, but I don't know how far they're going to go on that. Some of this is going to have to be case by case. There will be some cities like San Francisco will pass some kind of a law that says any kind of a public gathering and 500 yards around it, that's a sensitive place. They will try and overdo what a sensitive place constitutes, which is a lot of what they've been what they're trying to do with gun stores and zoning. They'll say you can't have a gun store with 1,000 feet of a school, a church, or a stop sign. You know what I mean? So they effectively zone FFLs out of existence. They will try and zone the areas where you can bear arms. They will try and designate as many areas as sensitive as they can, so it will limit where you're actually allowed to bear and carry a gun. So
we're going to face a lot of this kind of kookiness in these crazy states, and this is where the battle, even for carry, is going to have to continue. Yeah, it's going to shift around
because private venues can have whatever rules they want. It's not constitutional right to take a gun into somebody else's house. But whenever it's a government-controlled arena area, that's where the Second Amendment will kick in. And so the governments will be trying, the liberal anti-gun governments will be trying to designate as many areas as sensitive, so that they can ban guns in those areas as they can, and as many times. That's where they got into Times Square on New Year's Eve. And Paul Clement made a good point. That's not really a sensitive area. Times Square is not per se a sensitive area. Maybe on New Year's Eve it is, but that becomes a time, place, and manner restriction as opposed to a constitutional exception. And so this is the Full Employment Act for Second Amendment lawyers. That's why I'm saying we need to build up our war chest so that we can file as many lawsuits as possible, as quickly as possible, to shut down as many of these laws as we can, pre-existing and new ones that will inevitably be popping up, even if and when we win.
What would you say to the average gun owner to encourage them in this regard, and what would you say to them if they want to actually get in the fight to some degree to help?
Well, if you're in California, join a CRPA chapter. That's where we really try and keep information in the accessible to the folks who are being activists. You can be an activist in multiple different ways. You can give your time, you can give your money, you can blog be an influencer online, whatever, as you do such a great job at. But I think we can all be very, very hopeful that we're going to get a win out of this, that it's going to be a hard reset on constitutional Second Amendment litigation, and that it's going to take some lawyers to do that. There's some bad ones who have, not really done a great service to the Second Amendment, and then there's other good ones. I'd like to consider that my law firm and the lawyers that work for me are among them. And we're geared up to take this the next level and take the next steps here. And so financial support is critical. Even we don't charge market rates. We give discounts to all the nonprofits that we represent. But still, you can't work for free. I'd like to, but my wife won't let me. So support the causes, support the various entities that are promising to litigate. Be careful about the ones who are filing lawsuits really more for fundraising purposes than to advance the cause. There's a few of those out there. But get behind them, ask questions if you're not sure. And the best thing to do really is to stay informed about what's going on and figure out what you can do to help when a bill is proposed or an ordinance is being proposed or a politician is up for election. All these things are ways that you can make a big difference.
Yeah, we just discovered that elections can be won in the weirdest places, didn't we? I mean, look at what happened in Virginia and across the country with school boards and so on. And a lot of that is just because people have had enough and they've decided to actually get up off the chair or off the couch and get involved. I love it.
And it becomes personal at school because your kids are at stake, and that's where people really wake up.
Well, and it becomes personal with the Second Amendment when people are wanting to defund the police and when all this other stuff is happening. At some point, people want to defend themselves.
But the problem is a lot of people have a gun in their drawer, in their bedstand, and they don't think about it that much. And so they don't really wake up until something threatens that gun in that drawer. This is the problem that we have in getting all gun owners to become activists. They really need to appreciate the degree of a threat that their right to bear arms, even if it's just to have that gun in their nightstand, the degree of the threat that there is against them. Eventually, they're going to come for that gun.
If we get let's say we get a great win out of this. Let's say that the New York law is struck down as unconstitutional, which sort of declares the California schemes and Hawaii schemes and so on as unconstitutional as well. Those laws don't change immediately, do they? I mean, maybe in New York they do, but don't they have to be litigated in order to do that?
Yes, but CRPA has a California CCW case in the Ninth Circuit already. So as soon as that Supreme Court opinion comes down, we file a motion of this new ruling in the Ninth Circuit. Everything is stayed in the Ninth Circuit. The high cap mag ban, CRPA's challenge to the black rifle law, CRPA's challenge to the CCW laws. And the Duncan was the so-called high cap mag ban. They're all stayed. And when the Supreme Court rules, all of those cases will come back into play. But they're pretty far along already. So yes, but just because they strike down the New York law does not mean the California law goes down automatically. You have to litigate it somehow. But we've already been litigating it, so it'll be faster than it otherwise would be.
So does it essentially then just change the manner in which the Ninth Circuit would decide this because they can no longer use these judicial balancing tests if the Supreme Court throws them out?
Yeah.
So these courses are already, I mean, we've already got these things all the way to the Ninth Circuit. So the Ninth Circuit has just got these stayed. Is that because they're waiting for this case to be decided to see what they do?
So they're actually staying it because of the Duncan ruling. We got a great win. The CRPA got a great win in San Diego with Judge Benitez challenging California's ban on possession and purchase and importation of magazines that can hold over 10 rounds. That case was actually upheld by the 3-judge panel, that ruling. So we got the trial court judge and then the 3-judge panel to strike down that law, say it's unconstitutional. And then naturally the anti-gun judges on the Ninth Circuit went nuts and brought it up en banc to the 11-judge panel. It's been orally argued to the 11-judge panel, and they could render a decision at any time, but so it's not, that one's not formally stayed. But all the other ones are formally stayed behind Duncan. Because Duncan, we won at the first appellate level. And so now that en banc panel, I think, is waiting to see what happens in the New York case before they issue their opinion.
Well, is there anything else about this particular case that you want to cover that we haven't talked about?
No, not really. I mean, I will say for the last 10 years, I've been working with various clients to try and get another case to the Supreme Court. We recognized right after McDonald came down that the next question was going to be the standard of review. And with the NRA, the previous incarnation of the NRA was working very hard in California, funding cases, and across the country, funding cases, trying and get another one to the Supreme Court. And this is a case that's partially funded by the NRA, that New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case that the Supreme Court just heard. But there was a team effort there by a lot of different people across the country, a lot of different lawyers, to try and get another case back to the Supreme Court. Everybody recognized there needed to be one. And if I could just end on a personal note, I'd just like to say, my dear friend, colleague, and mentor, Chris Conti, who was the litigation director at NRA for a couple decades, and I worked very closely with him. Unfortunately, he passed away a few months ago. So big loss to the Second Amendment movement. He was a true Second Amendment warrior and a dear friend, and I miss him greatly. And everybody should. I wrote basically a requiem for a Second Amendment warrior in this month's CRPA magazine, and I just like to pay him tribute, because we all owe him, I think, a debt for the strategy and the maneuvers that he made to try and bring another case to the Supreme Court, and this was one of the ones that he was instrumental in getting moving and getting there.
You know what? If that's at all digital, I'll put a link in the description so that you can go read that article if you'd like. I do urge you to join CRPA if you're in California. For that matter, I urge you to join if you're not, because a lot of times the fight is here, and you got to fight the battle where it is. Because
they're not just focusing on California. The people that are pushing the stuff in California and the other battleground states are pushing it everywhere. And as soon as your area is vulnerable, as soon as they think they can get an inroad there, they will be pushing the same kind of, California is the moldy petri dish.
You really tried hard not to swear, didn't you? Well done.
California is the moldy laboratory. This is the moldy petri dish of bad gun laws.
Yeah, boy, is that the truth.
Wherever you are. So help us stop it in California now before it gets to you.
Yeah, and thank you very much. I'll just say it to the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. And that is an example of where the former NRA was really doing some great work and putting money in some great places. Right now, they're not. I'm still saying prayers for them, and I would like to see a strong NRA rise out of the ashes like the Phoenix. But at the moment, we need to put the money where the money's going to be useful, and it's going to be useful at other places. It's not going to be useful with the NRA right now. And so that's why I urge you, support CRPA, support the Second Amendment Law Center. Look, as Chuck said, be very, very careful where you put money, because sometimes it's just wasted. So did you want to say anything else, brother?
That'll do it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so very much for coming on the show, Chuck. I really do appreciate your time. Have a great week.
Anytime, you too.
All righty. Thank you very much for listening all the way through and hanging with us through the interview. Hopefully it helped encourage you, because I think there's some great encouraging news there. Obviously, the battle is not over. We'll have to continue fighting it, and we'll do it together. One way you can help me do that is by joining GunGuyTV Crew. It's a special place where I post every day, Monday through Friday, with exclusive content you can't get anywhere else. And frankly, when you sign up, it helps me keep the lights on. So please do sign up for GunGuyTV Crew and join the crew today. You'll find a link in the description. Have a great week. Thank you very much for everything that you do. And wherever you go, whatever you do, be safe.